All right. Welcome back, everyone. It's time for another deep dive.
Back into current affairs.
Exactly. And specifically for our UPSC aspirants out there, this is part 2 of our look at April 11th, 2025.
Lots to cover.
Lots to cover. And some of it, you might have heard before.
Well, it's just revision, right?
Exactly. Never hurts to hear things again when you're prepping, right? So we're going to be jumping into a bunch of different things: defense tech, a bit of the economy, some social justice stuff, agriculture, environment, and a couple of just key concepts that you should probably have in your back pocket.
The usual mix.
Yeah, that's what we do here. So let's get started, shall we?
Let's do it.
All right. Kicking things off, we've got some big news in defense and technology.
Big developments.
Big developments. The Indian Navy just got the green light for 26 Rafale Marine fighter jets.
Wow.
Yeah, these are going to be operating from the INS Vikrant, our aircraft carrier.
Purpose-built.
Exactly, purpose-built. And this is, just to be clear, separate from the 36 Rafales that the Indian Air Force already has.
Shows you how much emphasis they're putting on naval power.
Absolutely. So what's really interesting about the Rafale, and this goes for both the Navy's and the Air Force's versions, is that it's an omnirole aircraft.
Omnirole. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it basically means it can do a bit of everything: air defense, ground strikes, reconnaissance, even nuclear deterrence.
Jack of all trades.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's really important for the Navy because it means they can potentially consolidate their fleet of aircraft on the Vikrant. Fewer types of planes, less logistical headaches.
Makes sense. And speaking of the Rafale itself, it's made by Dassault Aviation over in France.
Right, and it's classified as a 4.5 generation fighter jet. Top speed, Mach 1.8. Not too shabby. Fast. Now, when we talk about generations of fighter jets, what are we actually talking about?
Good question. It's essentially a way of categorizing the technological evolution of these aircraft. So you've got your fourth generation fighters. These came around, let's say, from the late 70s, early 80s. Think of planes like the MiG-29, the F-16, our very own Mirage 2000. Classics. Designed to be multi-role, which means they could handle different missions.
Right, not just one specific job.
Exactly. Then you move into the 4.5 generation, where the Rafale sits, along with the Eurofighter Typhoon, for example.
And what sets them apart?
Well, they take the multi-role concept further, add in some stealth capabilities, more advanced engines for better range.
Sneaky and far-reaching.
That's the idea. Then you step up to the fifth generation. This is where you find the big boys, like the American F-22 Raptor and China's Chengdu J-20.
Those are the names you hear a lot.
Yeah, these are cutting edge. Even more advanced stealth tech, fully integrated systems, the works.
And it doesn't stop there, does it? I've been hearing whispers about a sixth generation already.
Oh yeah, the future is coming. Both the U.S. with their rumored F-47 and China with their reported J-36 and J-50 prototypes are pushing the boundaries.
So what can we expect from these next-gen fighters?
Well, a lot of buzz about artificial intelligence integration, potentially even hypersonic capabilities.
Wow, that's a whole different ballgame.
It is. It'll be fascinating to see how things evolve. But for now, let's come back down to Earth, literally.
Back down to Earth? What do you mean?
I mean, let's shift gears from the skies to, well, a train station.
A train station?
A train station. Specifically, the world's first 3D printed train station, just unveiled over in Orita, Japan.
3D printed? That sounds futuristic.
It is.
Yeah.
And it really showcases the potential of 3D printing, or additive manufacturing, as it's also known.
Okay, break it down for me. What exactly is additive manufacturing?
So instead of traditional manufacturing, which is subtractive, you start with a block of material and carve away until you get your shape. 3D printing builds things up layer by layer.
Layer by layer.
Yeah, from a digital design, of course.
Yeah, that's interesting. But why should we in India, especially us UPSC folks, care about a train station in Japan?
Because the implications of 3D printing are huge, especially for a developing country like ours.
Okay, I'm listening.
First off, rapid prototyping. You can go from idea to actual objects so much faster.
That could be a game changer.
It could. Now, the reduced reliance on a large workforce is a double-edged sword. It's great for efficiency, but we need to be mindful of our demographic dividend. We need to be thinking about how to reskill and redeploy labor.
Right, important point.
And then there's the customization aspect. With 3D printing, you can create highly personalized items and potentially do it more cost-effectively in the long run. Less material waste, less need for huge inventories.
So more efficient and sustainable.
Exactly. Plus, 3D printing allows for much more complex designs, geometries that would be very difficult or impossible to create with traditional methods.
Sounds like a win-win.
Pretty much. And the applications go way beyond train stations. We're talking manufacturing, healthcare, construction, even things like historical reconstruction and forensics.
Wow, so it really is a technology with a wide reach.
Yeah, it's got the potential to be truly transformative. But moving on, let's talk about the economy.
Okay, what's happening on that front?
Well, we've got fresh data from the Periodic Labor Force Survey, or PLFS for short.
The PLFS. And just to remind our listeners, this is conducted by the National Statistical Office.
That's right. And the latest one covers the whole of 2024, from January to December.
So it gives us a good picture of employment trends.
Exactly. And it covers a lot of ground, both literally and figuratively. We're talking about villages and urban blocks across the country.
Pretty comprehensive then.
It aims to be. The main objectives are to get a handle on short-term employment in urban areas, which is done quarterly using what's called the Current Weekly Status, or CWS.
CWS, okay. And what does that look at specifically?
Basically, it looks at whether people were employed in the 7 days preceding the survey.
So a very recent snapshot.
Exactly. And then annually, they look at both rural and urban areas using both the CWS and what they call the usual status.
So two different time frames.
Yeah. The usual status looks at employment over the past year.
A broader view.
Exactly. So what did the CWS tell us? Well, the labor force participation rate, or LFPR, stayed pretty much the same, 56.2%.
Now, LFPR, that's the percentage of people who are either working or actively looking for work.
That's it. And the worker population ratio, or WPR, which is the percentage of employed people in the total population, that also remained fairly constant at 53.5%.
Okay, so not much change there.
Not much. But the unemployment rate, or UR, did see a slight dip down to 4.9%.
A bit of good news, maybe?
Perhaps. But there was an interesting trend among rural women.
Oh, what was that?
It seems that fewer women reported being unpaid helpers in household enterprises.
Okay.
And that appears to have contributed to a drop in both the WPR and the LFPR among rural women.
Interesting. So a potential shift in how women are participating in the rural economy.
Yeah, something to keep an eye on for sure. Now, looking at the principal and subsidiary status, which is the longer-term picture.
Right. How did that compare?
We saw a slight decrease in both the LFPR, down to 59.6%, and the WPR, also down to 57.7%.
So a bit of a softening there, maybe?
Maybe. And unlike the CWS, the unemployment rate actually went up slightly to 3.2%.
So mixed signals from the labor market.
That's often the case.
Yeah.
But moving from the broader labor market, let's zoom in on the RBI and their Monetary Policy Committee.
The MPC, the folks who decide India's interest rates.
That's them. And their latest meeting had some noteworthy outcomes.
Everyone's always keen to know what the MPC decides.
Makes sense. Their decisions can have a big impact. So, a quick reminder, the MPC has 6 members, 3 from the RBI and 3 appointed by the government.
Right, a balance of perspectives.
In theory. Anyway, they decided to cut the policy repo rate by 25 basis points, bringing it down to 6%.
And just to be clear, the repo rate is the rate at which the RBI lends money to commercial banks.
That's it. And lowering it usually means cheaper borrowing, which encourages lending and investment.
Makes sense. And they also changed their overall policy stance, right?
They did. They moved from neutral to accommodative.
What does that mean in practice?
Well, neutral means they're kind of sitting on the fence, ready to either tighten or loosen policy depending on how things go.
Okay.
Accommodative means they're leaning towards loosening, likely to cut rates further to try and boost the economy.
So a more proactive approach.
You could say that, and this is interesting because it comes at a time of increasing global uncertainty, largely due to ongoing trade tensions.
A bit of a gamble, perhaps?
Maybe, but they clearly felt it was necessary. And there's more. They also proposed a draft framework on co-lending arrangements, or CLA.
Now, co-lending, that's when 2 or more lenders come together to finance a loan.
That's the gist.
Yeah.
And this new framework aims to broaden the scope of CLA beyond just priority sector lending.
Okay, so more sectors could benefit.
That's the plan. And it's not just limited to banks and NBFCs anymore either. All regulated financial entities could get involved.
Interesting.
Also, the NPCI, the folks behind UPI.
UPI, the backbone of so many transactions these days.
Right. They now have the power to set transaction limits for person-to-merchant UPI transactions, though they'll still need to consult with relevant stakeholders.
Makes sense to have some oversight.
And finally, the RBI is making its regulatory sandbox framework theme-neutral and on tap.
Theme neutral and on tap.
Yeah. Basically, it means that fintech companies can apply to test their innovative products and services at any time, regardless of the specific focus area.
So encouraging more innovation in the fintech sector.
That's the goal. So yeah, the MPC meeting had a lot of interesting outcomes.
A lot to unpack there, but let's move on to something a bit different. Social justice and human rights.
Always important.
Always important. And there's been some news from the NHRC, the National Human Rights Commission.
Yeah, they've taken suo motu cognizance of the problems faced by prisoners in India.
Suo motu cognizance, meaning they've taken this up on their own initiative.
That's right. They've sent notices to the chief secretaries of all states and union territories asking for detailed reports.
Well, reports on what exactly?
On things like overcrowding in prisons, lack of basic amenities, and the state of healthcare facilities.
Pretty serious issues.
Very serious. And it's important to remember that under our Constitution, prisons are a state subject.
So the responsibility lies with the individual states.
Exactly. But the NHRC is clearly concerned enough to step in. And the problems they've highlighted paint a very grim picture.
Okay. What are some of the key concerns?
Well, overcrowding is a huge problem. The national average occupancy rate is something like 131%.
That's way over capacity.
Way over. And then you have the issue of under-trial prisoners. These are people who are still awaiting trial, but they're stuck in jail.
Right.
And in 2022, they made up a whopping 75.8% of the prison population.
That's a shockingly high number.
It is. And then you have the lack of basic amenities, especially for women prisoners. Less than 40% of prisons provide sanitary napkins, and very few have dedicated facilities for women.
That's appalling. Basic dignity and safety should be a given, regardless of whether someone is convicted or not.
Absolutely. And this lack of basic facilities makes women prisoners far more vulnerable to violence and psychological distress.
It's a terrible situation. And what about those on death row?
Well, there's often a huge delay in the judicial process, which means very few executions actually take place.
So they're left in limbo for years.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of discrimination within prisons, reports of caste-based work allocation, manual scavenging, and even prisoners being classified based on their social status outside of prison.
So the inequalities of the outside world are being replicated inside prison walls.
Sadly, that seems to be the case. Now, there are some legal safeguards in place. Section 479 of the Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita 2023 has provisions for granting bail to under-trial prisoners who've served a significant portion of their potential sentence.
So there's at least some hope for those stuck in the system.
And plea bargaining is also an option under the BNSS, which allows for negotiations before trial in some cases. And of course, we have international guidelines like the Bangkok Rules, which focus on the treatment of women prisoners, and the Nelson Mandela Rules, which outline the minimum standards of treatment for all prisoners.
So there is a framework for humane treatment.
There is. But the NHRC's intervention highlights the fact that the reality on the ground often falls far short of these standards.
Right. A lot of work still needs to be done.
A lot of work.
Yeah.
But let's switch gears again, this time to agriculture and water management.
A vital sector for India.
Absolutely vital. And there's been some interesting news on that front. The Union Cabinet has given the green light for the modernization of command area development and water management, or MCADWM for short.
MCADWM.
And this is going to be a sub-scheme under the PMKSY, right?
That's right. The Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, which, by the way, was launched back in 2015-16 with the goal of improving irrigation efficiency and coverage.
So MCADWM is a part of that broader effort. Precisely.
Yeah.
And what it specifically aims to do is modernize the irrigation water supply networks that originate from existing canals and other sources within what are called command areas.
Command areas.
These are basically areas that are specifically designated to benefit from irrigation projects.
Okay, that makes sense. And what exactly does this modernization entail?
One key component is creating a robust back-end infrastructure to support micro-irrigation up to 1 hectare.
Micro-irrigation, that's things like drip irrigation, right?
Right, exactly. And this will be done using underground pressurized pipelines.
So taking the water directly to the roots.
That's the idea. And technology is going to play a big role in this modernization as well.
How so?
They're going to be using SCADA, which stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition, and IoT, the Internet of Things, for water accounting and management.
Ah, so using technology to make the system more efficient.
Exactly. The goal is to increase water use efficiency, boost agricultural production, and promote sustainable farming practices. All very good things. And they're going to do this through what's called Irrigation Management Transfer, or IMT.
IMT, okay. What's that about?
It basically means transferring the management of irrigation systems to water user societies, or WUS.
So giving the farmers more control over their water resources.
That's the idea. And these WS will also get support for 5 years and be linked with farmer producer organizations, or FPOs.
So a holistic approach, not just about the technology.
Exactly. And a key objective of all this is to attract young people to agriculture by showcasing these modern techniques.
Takes sense. Modernizing the sector is key to attracting the next generation.
Totally agree. And all this builds on an existing framework, the Command Area Development and Water Management Program, which was actually launched way back in 1974-75.
So this has been a long-standing concern.
It has. The program has been renamed and restructured over the years, and since 2015-16, it's been part of the PMKSY's Harket Kopani component.
Harket Kopani, which means water to every farm.
That's right. And the program has 2 main aspects: structural interventions, like on-farm development and drainage works, and non-structural interventions, like grants to water users associations and training on water management.
So MCAWM is the next step in this long evolution.
Exactly. Now let's shift our attention to environment and geography.
Always important, especially in today's world.
Absolutely. And there's been some news from the National Green Tribunal, or NGT.
The NGT, the environmental watchdog.
That's them. They've ordered Haryana to take strict measures to stop illegal mining in the Aravalli Range.
The Aravalli Range, those ancient hills?
One of the oldest folded mountain systems on Earth, actually. It's stretching about 670 kilometers from near Delhi through Haryana and Rajasthan all the way to Gujarat.
Wow, quite a stretch.
It is. And the highest point is Guru Shikhar. Several important rivers also originate in the Aravallis, like the Banas, the Sahibi, and the Luni.
So they're crucial for the region's ecology.
Absolutely, and that's why the NGT's intervention is so important.
Right, protecting these fragile ecosystems.
Exactly. Now, in other environmental news, the GEAC, the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee, has cleared the import of genetically modified alfalfa hay from the U.S.
Alfalfa, that's mainly used as animal feed, right?
Yeah, it's a legume, actually.
Yeah.
Though it can also be considered an herb. Probably originated somewhere in South or Central Asia. It is grown all over the world these days.
So a globally important crop.
It is. And it's been cultivated for centuries, both as animal feed and for traditional medicinal uses.
Interesting. So the GEAC has given the go-ahead, but I understand there are still some hurdles.
Yeah, the Agriculture Ministry still needs to give its final approval. And there has been some trade concerns raised by the U.S. as well.
So it's not a done deal just yet.
Not yet. Now, shifting gears a bit, there's been some interesting research on mesoscale convective systems, or MCSs.
MCSs, no, I'm not familiar with those.
They're basically large, organized groups of thunderstorms.
Like a super thunderstorm.
Kind of. They can span hundreds of kilometers and last for hours.
Wow.
And they can dump a lot of rain, often causing flooding and damage.
Sounds pretty intense.
They can be. And a recent study has found that soil moisture can actually be a good predictor of these MCSs.
So by monitoring soil moisture, we can get a better idea of where these storms might form.
That's the idea. And some parts of the world are more prone to MCSs than others. West and Central Africa, Northern India, Argentina, China, and the U.S. Great Plains.
Good to know. Now, turning to our waterways, the first no objection certificate has been issued through the new digital portal for national waterways.
That's a step in the right direction, making things easier.
Exactly. And this particular NOC is for a jetty on the Malim River, which is on the Mandovi River in Goa.
Mandovi. That's the lifeline of Goa.
It is, also known as the Mahadai or Marade.
Right. It joins the Zwari River to form the Mormugao Harbor and eventually flows into the Arabian Sea.
And where does it originate?
In the Western Ghats of Karnataka. It's also got some beautiful waterfalls along its course, like Dudsagar and Virpoha.
So not just economically important, but scenically beautiful as well.
Indeed. And one of its major tributaries is the river Mapusa.
Okay, so this new jetty on the Malim, part of the broader effort to develop our inland waterways.
Exactly. Improving connectivity, facilitating trade.
Makes sense. And speaking of maritime infrastructure, the Vizhinjam International Seaport in Kerala has just welcomed a huge container ship, the MSC Turkey.
That's a big deal. Vizhinjam is being hailed as India's first deepwater transshipment port.
Transshipment port.
It means it's a hub for transferring containers between large ships that travel on major shipping routes.
Ah, so it's like a central switching point for cargo.
Exactly. So this is a major milestone for India's maritime ambitions.
And where exactly is Vizhinjam?
It's in Thiruvananthapuram, And it's run by Vizhinjam International Seaport Limited, a company owned by the Kerala government.
So a state-owned enterprise,
That's right. And it's designed as a natural deep-water multi-purpose seaport.
meaning it can handle various types of cargo.
Exactly, though the main focus is container transshipment.
Okay. And how's the project being developed?
Under a landlord model with a public-private partnership, or PPP, component.
So the government owns the land and infrastructure, but private companies handle the operations.
That's it. They call it the DBFOT model. Design, build, finance, operate, and transfer.
Interesting model. Now let's end on a positive note with some good news from the world of conservation.
All right, I like those.
Some researchers from Kerala have won the Future Conservationist Award for their work on conserving the Malabar gray hornbill.
That's fantastic news. The Malabar gray hornbill is a beautiful bird endemic to the Western Ghats.
Endemic, meaning it's only found there.
Exactly. Typically found at lower elevations in the Ghats.
And the Future Conservationist Award, that's given by the Conservation Leadership Program, right?
That's right. The CLP is a partnership between several big conservation organizations, BirdLife International, Fauna and Flora International, and the Wildlife Conservation Society.
Big names in conservation.
They are. And the award provides crucial support to young conservationists who are doing important work.
Excellent. And sadly, the Malabar gray hornbill is listed as vulnerable by the IUCN. So these conservation efforts are all the more crucial.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up, let's touch on a few other important concepts.
Okay, fire away.
Well, the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, recently talked about something called the Jevons Paradox in the context of AI.
The Jevons Paradox, I'm not sure I've heard of that.
It basically says that when technology makes something more efficient, we often end up using more of that thing overall.
That's counterintuitive.
It is. But think about it. If something becomes cheaper or easier to use, we tend to use it more.
Makes sense.
And this idea was first put forward by William Stanley Jevons back in the 19th century.
What was he looking at?
He was looking at steam engines. He noticed that when more efficient steam engines were introduced, coal consumption actually went up, not down.
Because they were more efficient, so people used them more.
Exactly. And Nadella's point is that we might see the same thing with AI.
As AI becomes more powerful and accessible, we might end up using a lot more of it, which could have implications for things like energy consumption.
That's exactly. Something to think about. Now, shifting gears to culture, Tripura is going to be hosting a Jatra Utsav.
Jatra. Now, that's a word I haven't heard in a while.
It's a form of folk theater, very popular in Bengal and Odisha.
Okay, I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it.
Well, it's got its roots in the Bhakti movement back in the 16th century.
Bhakti movement, that was all about devotion to God, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And Jatra was a way of spreading these devotional ideas.
Interesting.
And it's a real mix of art forms. You've got song, dance, acting, recitation, all combined into one.
A real spectacle, then?
It can be. And the themes are quite diverse. Mythological stories, secular stories, humor, heroism, melodrama, you name it.
So, something for everyone.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Now, finally, a bit of news from the Registrar General of India, or RGI.
The RGI, the folks who handle all our demographic data.
That's them. They've issued a warning to hospitals about delays in reporting births and deaths.
Seems like a pretty basic administrative task.
It is. But it's crucial for accurate data collection.
And accurate data is crucial for everything.
Absolutely. So the RGI, which was set up in 1949 under the Ministry of Home Affairs, has a whole bunch of responsibilities.
Like what?
Well, they conduct the census, oversee the civil registration system for births and deaths, manage the sample registration system for vital statistics, maintain the National Population Register, and even conduct the mother tongue survey.
Quite a portfolio.
It is. So hospitals need to do their part by reporting births and deaths promptly.
Otherwise, the data gets skewed, and that can mess up all sorts of planning and policy making.
Exactly. So there you have it, a whirlwind tour of current affairs.
Indeed. We've covered a lot of ground today, from defense to the economy, social justice, agriculture, the environment, and even some key concepts.
A good mix, I'd say.
And we hope it's been helpful for you, our listeners, especially those preparing for the UPSC.
Best of luck to all of you.
And remember, these issues are all interconnected. Technology influences the economy, social concerns shape governance, environmental factors impact development. It's all part of the big picture.
Seeing the connections is key.
Absolutely. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive, please do like and subscribe for more.
We'd love to have you back.
And as you continue your UPSC journey, think about this. What do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities facing India in the years to come? How will these different areas we've discussed today shape the future? It's something to ponder.
Food for thought.
Food for thought indeed. Until next time.
See you then.
Bye for now.